get into telling you a little bit about myself real quick. So basically, I've been a believer since birth. You could say I was born on a pew, even. But ever since I could volunteer in ministry, I did. So I volunteered in kids ministry, youth ministry, even I worked in the sound booth in big church. I still call it big church. I'm speaking in big church now. It's crazy. But anyways, I can remember when I was still a wee lad at the old church, and my family would show up because we all helped out. We'd show up earlier than a lot of people, maybe even before Pastor Kelly. I don't know. He lives at the church. But we'd show up early, and I'd run off to the kids' sound booth, and I'd get back there, and I'd sit down, and the only reason I would go back there is because under the desk there was a heater, and I love heaters. My family can tell you, even my grandparents, they can tell you I love heaters. I'd flip that on max heat and just fall asleep on the desk until Dave showed up. Dave would come and wake me up, and then we'd get moving on whatever we were going to do. But from that volunteering, that was just one story, but I've been volunteering, like I said. From that, I moved into interning with this church, for about 2.5 years. And from that flowed straight into me becoming the interim youth pastor for actually this previous summer. And it is honestly one of the greatest experiences of my life. And from that, now presently, I am the assistant next gen pastor. It's a really long title, but I've been doing that for about 5 months now. As well, I'm a junior at Oral Roberts University, which is a pretty big deal for me. It means I got one more year or so left. But speaking of that, in a little bit, this is why Pastor Kelly wanted to put me up here. And I had some time, but it shocked me when he asked me. In just like 18 or so days, I'll be heading to France. And I'm not going just to France to sightsee and stuff. But while I'm there in France, I'll be studying abroad. The youth is kind of salty I'm going to France. It's okay. They still love me. I still love them. I hope they love me. But while I'm over there in France, I'll be studying abroad. And I think that's a really cool opportunity because I'll be studying ministry and leadership. And to top things off, I'll actually be interning with another church over there. And it'll be what ORU calls the largest spirit-empowered church in France. And that caught me by surprise. And on top of that, even more, I get to be partnering with the lead pastor and youth pastor like almost every day when I'm interning. And I feel like an infomercial. And then there's more. I get to lead my own small group while I'm there in the church. So, I mean, God's just like blessing me and blessing me and blessing me for all the training and everything that Pastor Kelly and my parents have all put me through. But that's all well and dandy. Let me tell you now, and hopefully by the end of this sermon, I'll be able to explain why all of that is not nearly as important as it sounds. So now, let me tell you a little bit more. I'm a storyteller. I love to tell stories. And since I'm still a young man, a lot of my stories revolve around me and my family. I can remember one story, just to give you a little more about me. I can remember one story, and me and my family went to Hawaii. You know, luxurious Hawaii, beaches, ocean. Yeah, we went hiking. Pastor Kelly loved that, hiking. But we went hiking, we went to this mountain, and we start going. We're going this trail. It gets a little rougher, but we keep on going. And we come across this big old gaping gorge. And it's like 20, 30-foot distance with like a 20-foot drop with a single metal beam to cross it. And instead of, my crazy family, instead of being like, nope, I choose life, my family went, this must be the right way. So we start going across single file line. Everyone's on all fours except for my dad. And we start going across, and I'm behind my sister Gentry. And we're going along. And then my sister stops in front of me. I look up, she froze. So what do you do whenever you have no way to move forward? I look down, and the action movies, whenever they're like, don't look down, and you look down, and it's the panic, that's true. That's from experience. I had that panic fill me. Luckily, my dad, once he crossed, came back over, grabbed Gentry off the beam, which he's standing on the shoulder, and walks her across, and I come through. So after our triumphant victory over this big old hole, we keep on walking. We're like, yes, we did it. We're going to see the end of this hiking trail. And we come to a sign, and lo and behold, not allowed. You are not permitted to go this way. So we hike on back over that beam. It was nightmarish. One more way shorter story. It's not as deadly, but I still thought I was going to die. Actually, I played football, and after a football game, we went to Texas Roadhouse to celebrate. And I ordered my meal. It's the peanut place, so I ate some peanuts. And I ordered a side of mac and cheese, because what kid doesn't love mac and cheese? I still love mac and cheese. Or am I mac and cheese lovers? Yeah. Okay, thank you. But, so I ordered a side of mac and cheese. Now, bless you. Now, I ate my meal, and I got to my side, and I take a spoon, and I'm like, I put it back out, spit it in a napkin. My mom sees this, and I think she thought I was being a picky eater. She's like, what's wrong? Eat the mac and cheese. And I'm like, my little kid head can't say what's wrong with it. It's just like, mm-mm. So my mom's like, eat the mac and cheese. And I'm like, no. And she's like, you're gonna eat the mac and cheese. So I eat the mac and cheese, and to make a really long story short, I got very sick. Very, very sick. Like little kids, okay, yeah. But, my mom always says I only tell bad stories of her, so I want to do her right just this once. Because all the bad stories are the funny ones, right? But anyways, I can remember my mom telling me something that my dad told her, but she said it first to me, so she gets credit. My mom told me something, and it's a phrase, and I'll never forget it. She said she has to remind herself that she's not as important as she thinks she is. Now, hold on. Let me show you the verse where my dad derived this from, and this is found in Romans 12:3. Now, it says here in the verse, God has given me a special gift, and that is why I have something to say to each of you. Don't think that you are better than you really are. You must see yourself just as you are. Decide what you are by the faith God has given each of us. Now, once again, to reiterate the phrase, she has to remind herself that she's not as important as she thinks she is. Now, that could at first sound self-deprecating, self-putting down, all of those negative stigma of that. But this began to swell a thought within me that merged with a song from Casting Crowns that we actually got to go see in concert live, which was awesome. But this song, Nobody, if you've never heard of it, it's just a song. It tells about how being a nobody, and that's the title of the sermon, how that swirled together with that thought that my mom just planted in me and formed this sermon that I had no idea I was going to speak for this, but apparently God did, so he planted that. But anyways, this whole, like I said, I got the title Nobody from the song because I thought the name, thanks, Mom, for telling me something that Dad told you that he actually paraphrased from the Bible, wasn't the theme I was going for in sermon titles, so I just went with Nobody. But let's go ahead and get into some of the nobodies of the Bible real quick. And my first one is David. And you may be saying, wait, David, he's a king, Goliath, bears, lions, he's the big guy, a guy after God's own heart. But this is before all that. This is before even Samuel anointed him. And his nobody trait that I picked out and that I found valuable in him was they did not think he was worthy at the beginning. And what that was, so I'm going to give you some context before we get into the verses here. So Saul messed up, the current king, and God was like, well, now I can't establish your kingdom. Samuel, go find my new king. Samuel went out, and he found his way to the house of Jesse. And as he walked in, he told Jesse what was going down. He's like, I'm here to anoint a new king. Bring your boys before me. So then Jesse brings out all of his boys, and then, you got Samuel starts looking at them. You got all the Old Testament characteristics. You got the oldest, the strongest looking, the most handsome, and he starts looking over them. He's like, this is a fine bunch. Surely one of these will be king. Nope. Okay, it's not the oldest. That's happened before. Not the strongest. Okay, maybe God wants a pretty king. Not the most handsome. Nope. So then this is where we pick up in the verse. Now this is in 1 Samuel 16, 10 through 11. The Lord has not chosen these, Samuel said. So he asked Jesse, are these all of the sons you have? I think Jesse was a little bit like, they're still the youngest, Jesse answered. He's tending the sheep. Now, shepherds were like the low of it. So, if you look at this here, David's own father, Jesse, did not even consider him in the running for the king. Didn't even consider him for a chance at all. He didn't consider him worthy. He was like, he's doing his job. He'll keep on doing his job. That's what he'll be forever. He's not mounting up to much. He had no expectations for his own son. And this brings me to my first point right here, and it's allow yourself to be a nobody to the world. Now, everybody is a somebody to someone, but I think when we let the expectations that others put on us dictate how we move, that's where the problems arise. That the only verse I'm aware of that tells us to be mindful of others' view is whenever Paul tells us not to be a stumbling block to other Christians. But here's the thing. We need to find our identity in Christ, and everything needs to move from him without I don't want to say concept, but without the idea of seeing others' views. So whenever we have our identity in Christ, everything should inherently be flowing from that. And if we're moving with Christ, we shouldn't be offending other Christians if they're truly following Christ as well. Are you with me there? Thank you. And it just says we shouldn't be a stumbling block to other Christians. Plus, to add on, I think it's a lot less stressful to be able to move through your life, to be able to move in Christ whenever you don't have to think about what everyone else is seeing you as. That whenever you stand up and say something, that you don't have to worry about what all the other people are going to say, because you know that the one it was meant to reach, it will reach, because that's what God will do. So the second nobody I want to get into real quick is Esther. Now, you know Esther, the queen mighty, but before that, and this is where I want to get into her nobody trait real quick, is kind of the flip of David, is that she thought her position would ensure her safety, that she thought she was mighty enough. Now, let me give you some context before we get into the verses again. Esther now, she was an orphan child, picked up by Mordecai. Mordecai raised her. She considered him a dad. He considered her a daughter. And he raised her, and he was a Jew. So that was that raising style. So now, Esther, they grew up, and she became a woman. The king, now let's flash over to the king's court. King's court, king requests something of the queen, and the queen says, nah. Well, this is unheard of. Unprecedented, in fact. So the king goes to his wise council of men. He says, boys, the queen said no. So all the wise men are like sweating up a storm. They're like, this is what? She said no? So all the wise men start talking and stalking, and they're like, if we let this happen and we let this get away without any consequences, all the women will revolt. There'll be a women riot. So one of the wise men speak up and say, remove that queen before everyone starts saying no to the king. So the king does so from the wise men's wisdom. So then, what does a king do that just lost his queen? Holds a beauty pageant for another one. So he opens up this thing, and Mordecai is like, Esther, you're a nice looking, go. You can do that. That's totally on you. So Esther goes in, and she starts, I don't want to call it competing, but kind of was. So then, by the grace of God, she finds favor with the guy that's running it, not the king, but one of his people. So then this guy helps her get to the king a little easier, and then she finds favor with the king. So it's basically all lined up to happen. So make it short, Esther becomes queen. And then, so now, flash forward, everything was great and all, but now one of the people in the court was not liking Mordecai exactly. And I guess this was a time of desperate measures, because Mordecai goes, I don't like Mordecai. I don't want him around anymore. I'll just kill all the Jews. Whoa, hold on, man. But so he starts saying this, and he goes to the king, and he says it real smoothly. He's like, King, don't you know there's this people group that aren't worshiping your name like everyone else. They're not bowing down. King's like, how dare they? So then king gives him the ring, which is like the stamp to do anything, basically, and says, here, do what you need to do. So the guy runs off, and he makes the order to kill all the Jews on a set day. Mordecai hears about this and goes back, and he sends a messenger to Esther, because he can't go in. And he's like, this guy is trying to kill all the Jews. This is terrible. You need to go to the king and do something. Now, Esther sees this message and scratches her head a little bit like, if you walk into the king's court without being summoned, you might just die, like on the spot. So I don't know if I'll do that. So this message gets sent back to Mordecai, and this is where we pick up here. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows? But you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Now let me go ahead and get into my second point. And this point is to recognize that you are God's temple. Now I think that the wisdom in these verses are twofold. One is to realize you're not as high and mighty as you think you are. You're not there, and you can't hold yourself there by your own means. You're not strong enough. And two, perhaps you were put here for a reason that was this exact moment. Like you don't know if this is exactly why you came to this position at this point in time. So now, the thing about God and recognize that you're God's temple, God doesn't build his temples just for looks. That both metaphorically and literally, in the Old Testament and New Testament, I guess, Israelites would build up the temples, and they made them look nice. But they didn't just make them to look nice. They built them nice to glorify God, and they were places of sacrifice and worship. God today builds his temples for the purpose of love, forgiveness, and redemption. These temples are us. So I think here, God built up his temple in Esther, and if she wasn't going to carry out her purpose, God may have just allowed her to be torn back down. Because something we need to realize that if we're not performing the purpose for the temple, then what's the purpose of the temple? So now, this is the key word real quick. I said allowed. God does not seek your destruction. God doesn't seek you out to destroy you. However, he may allow you to be torn down so that for the sake that you may be built on a better and perfect foundation, so that you may build up stronger and better than before. So this is the counterpart in why I think what my mom told me is so rich in wisdom. That she said that she has to remind herself that she's not important as she thinks she is. That though there's that low part, there's the high part as well. That whenever you are on that high roll, you have to recognize that it's not you who has won those victories, but it is God. Now, another great biblical example I can think of is Joseph, as a matter of fact, who does this. You know, Joseph, the coat of many colors. And he had a dream. Now, I completely believe 100% this dream was from God. But the way he told it, that's where he found the fallacy. So, you know, Joseph had this dream when he was little. He was the youngest. And he had the dream that everything was bowing down, even the sun and stars, everything bowed down to him. Now, older siblings, if you have a younger sibling, like little sibling, that says, you'll all bow down to me and you'll all work for me, what do? Noogie, you throw them on the couch, don't push them down the stairs. That's bad. Bad older sibling. I was the youngest. I don't think I was ever pushed downstairs. I wouldn't remember it anyways. But the thing about Joseph is that he still came into the position that God had promised him, but he had to go through a humbling process. That his brothers, they took him, threw him in a pit, threw him down the stairs, and sold him. And he became a servant, he went to prison, and he went through a whole tribulation, but he still reached that promise on a better foundation, built up better and stronger than he ever could have been. God had promised it and he fulfilled it, but sometimes he has to allow you to be torn down. Now the third, or I guess let's call Joseph 2.5. Gideon, the third person I want to talk about, his nobody trait that I saw was that he didn't believe that he was important enough. Now, the context behind Gideon, real quick, love context. Israel's being attacked from a lot of different people, and this is mostly due to the fact that they were worshiping idols and other gods and stuff, so God allowed the other enemies to rise up. So people, their enemies were merging groups, they were fist bumping, they were like, yeah, we're gonna take down the Israelites. It wasn't even like the Israelites were that big of an army. They weren't even that menacing, but they were just demolishing them. So, so what do? Someone finally calls out to God, and they're like, God, like, where are the miracles from the old days? Where are the signs and wonders? And so God sends an angel down, and this angel goes under a tree and finds Gideon. And he says to Gideon, through your hand, I will see this land saved. And this is where we pick up. Pardon me, my Lord. Isn't that's like, wait, what? Hold on. So he says, pardon me, my Lord, Gideon replied, but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. Gideon here is saying, he's showing his true identity of himself. He's saying, I'm the lowest of the low. You could pick from anywhere else and find a better option. Why are you seeking me? So immediately, he's doubting, if he really knows everything, is this really God? And then he's thinking, am I really worth it? So here Gideon says in the next one, if it's really you, give me a sign. Wait here, I'll make an offering. Goes into his little teepee, like something, hut, house, and he comes back. I think there were tents. He comes back out with the offering. Angel says, put it on this rock. Puts it on the rock. Angel goes, burns it up. Now, for a lot of people, for everyone, pretty much, this would be enough. This would be enough. So Gideon doesn't doubt that it's God anymore, but he still doubts that God would choose him. And so Gideon, we see a little bit more doubt. We're going to read into the next part. We're going to skip a little bit. If you're really going to save Israel through my hand, make this fleece wet with dew, but the ground dry. God did so. God saw this, and he saw Gideon's doubt. And even though it was this like trivial little thing, God's like, I'll give you a sign. I'll give you another sign. So he does so. Gideon wakes up. It's like, yep, that's dewful. Wrings out the fleece into a bowl full of water. That's a lot of dew. And the ground is all dry around it. For some reason, that's still not enough to get rid of Gideon's doubt. He says, don't be angry, but if it really, really is going to be me that's going to carry out this mission, make the ground wet, but the fleece dry. He does this, and God did so. That exact same thing. Not exact same, kind of flipped. But he followed through with what Gideon was saying so that he could remove the doubt. And this brings me to my third and last point. Realize that you are somebody to God. Now, I don't think this process of Gideon's was to test God. I think it was him showing his self-doubt that he was capable of such things. But that's the thing about God. It doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter where we've come from. It doesn't matter our own means and tools. God covers everything. Now, I think God saw Gideon's heart and knew his struggle. And as a result, that's why he sought after him and knew that this was the one who was going to lead them. Because oftentimes, God picks the most humble to lead the strongest. Now, something I believe we all struggle, have a point of struggle with is feeling like we're loved or useful. That even though we're in the day of immediate communication, some of us could never feel more alone. Now, let me say something real quick, and please believe me when I say it's from a place of love, but maybe if you spent the time reading the Bible, praying and worshiping as you did on social media, in someone's DMs, or even on Tinder, maybe you'd find the love and attention you're truly seeking after. Now, God can see your heart, and he sees you hurting. He sees your pain, and he wants to do something about it. But that's the thing about God. He's a gentleman. He waits on you. And most of the time, he won't even move in unless it's a life or death situation. And even in some cases, he doesn't, because he wants to love and respect your decisions. Now, if we look at it, it's such a tragedy to think that someone could go without knowing God, they had that decision, but they moved away, and then something terrible happens. But I think that's the kind of thing that only parents can understand. It's really hard to wrap our minds around if we don't have kids, that sometimes you just got to let them make their mistakes so that they can learn. Now, I want to ask something from everyone real quick. If everyone could please close your eyes. Now, I remember a time, this is my last story, I remember a time when I felt so void of importance, so lacking in love with no purpose in life. I went through the motions of everyday life on autopilot day after day. And I remember laying on my bed after getting home, just wanting to cry. I felt I didn't deserve anything, and I just didn't want to be me anymore. I felt so broken and lonely inside despite all the people I had around me. I sat and endured in this terrible place for so long that I forgot how to genuinely care and feel cared for. That was until I turned it all over to God. I already had a promise from God that I would be some sort of pastor, but it had been years since he last said anything. I went to a youth camp, and there at the altar, they made a call. They said, if anyone is willing to give everything for the kingdom, stand and run to the front. This is exactly what I was asking for. I wanted to be accepted, and I wanted to be someone for someone else. I sat at the altar until both my legs went numb, and I laid on the cold concrete. I cried and cried for probably an hour and a half. After my long wait, suddenly there was this peace in me. My tears stopped, and I couldn't cry anymore. For those folks that really love their beds like I do, it was like that feeling after you wake up on your own with no alarm clock in the comfiest spot on the bed at the perfect temperature. It was truly the perfect peace that I had never felt before. And suddenly I knew God was there, and he still loved me. He had never stopped loving me, and I was still a somebody to him. Now, I'd like to ask that if God is touching your heart right now, through any of these stories or any of these ways, like he touched mine, and you want to be a somebody to God and a nobody to the world, keep your eyes closed. Please stand slowly and quietly.